Welcome to the Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast, hosted by Peter O'Toole, sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. Today on the Microscopists.
In this episode of the Microscopists, I'm joined with Ernst Stelzer. It's really entertaining, and we hear him talk about time travel.
I think I wanted to go back I wanted to be a knight or something like this. Yeah.
How microscopy has developed since Ernst started out in his research.
When I started, we recorded 4 images per day. Yeah.
And why the status quo isn't necessarily a good thing.
They tell you, but the problem is the sample preparation. No, the problem is not the sample preparation. That's an opportunity.
And playing golf in a kilt.
I think it was whiskey. We had a dram. Yeah.
All in this episode of the Microscopists. Hi, I'm Peter O'Toole, and today on the Microscopists, I'm joined by Ernst Stelzer from Goethe-Universität in Frankfurt. Ernst, hi, how are you?
Hi, Peter. How are you?
No, I'm good, fine. Thank you. So, where's the best place to start? Do you know? I think the best place. I've got 2 places I could start actually. Firstly, my first meeting with you was actually a really important time, a really important moment in my career, and actually quite a few careers. And that was a course at EMBL. So it was the EMBO Light Microscopy Workshops, which was a 2-week intensive course. And you were there talking about 4pi and other techniques at the time. And that was mind-blowing. It just opened my eyes to the world of microscopy and the careers and the potential going forward, that this is really a technology going forward. And it wasn't just me. There were other people there, Claudio Lucas, Oliver Rox, Ricardo Henriquez. We were all on that course and all truly inspired by it. It was brilliant. So thank you very much. I have to say, some of the technologies you talked about was quite a high level of physics, which I was struggling with during that course. And I actually remember coming down at the end of the seminar to ask you personal questions to explain it. And you were really patient and took your time so I could understand it and still understand it, thankfully, today. So thank you very much.
That's a good start. Yeah, now I feel much better.
Relax you into it. The other time was actually when I was hosting ELMI in York back in 2006, 2007. I can't remember exactly which. And actually one of the invited speakers to talk at it. And you didn't show up. You didn't get there. And I remember the phone call from yourself, taking the voicemail, thinking, oh no, I've got this voicemail from Ernst Stelzer explaining he couldn't make the meeting. So would you like to explain now why you couldn't make that meeting?
Actually, we were in Valencia, I think, at that time. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was Valencia. And we were at a meeting. And instead of going back to Heidelberg at that time, we actually had a kind of group retreat there. And unluckily, several things happened, but one of the things that was a complete disaster is that I had no all my clothes I didn't have access to them because I gave them to the hotel to have them washed, and unluckily there was a holiday, so I didn't get it, and I would have had to purchase everything completely new for that meeting. Yeah. And that's why I think that was one of the reasons why I canceled. There was probably another one, but I can't recall that anymore. It's quite a while ago. Yeah. It's one of those. There was another meeting where I went to London, and then unluckily Lufthansa didn't deliver my suitcase. I remember that one very well. So that happened several times to me. But this one I think in York, for the meeting in York, was one of the worst because I had nothing, absolutely nothing. Yeah.
Like I said, that is one of the most original excuses I think we've ever heard.
Sounds like but it's not an excuse. It was really true. Yeah.
No, your team were backing you up all the way because they came over, introduced themselves, and also made their excuses.
Okay. Yeah, it was really bad. Yeah.
So you were coming over at that point, I think, to talk about 4-pi and different imaging techniques. So I think you were at Heidelberg at the time back
Yes.
then, if I'm
At
correct.
EMBL, yeah.
So you've had quite you sent me a lovely image, actually, of a timeline of, I've just got to find it, of a lot of the innovations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of mind-blowing to see just how many innovations you've got. There was a nice web one as well, which I didn't manage to get uploaded. That's a huge number of techniques in fact, some of those years have multiple techniques. I think it's 2002, 2003, huge numbers of new innovations at the same time. Where did you start and how did you get there?
Actually, that's a good question. Yeah, because what I will say is probably what a lot of people say, is that they've been in the right place at the right time. Yeah, so I always thought I was quite lucky. Yeah, because I mean, I can tell you how I got to EMBL that's because I also think that's a nice story, because actually I studied physics in Frankfurt. And then I did my diploma thesis at the Max Planck Institute for Biophysics, which at that time was located south of the Main, and now it's on the northern side in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to inverse problems. Yeah. So because we did light scattering, dynamic light scattering, and that is a typical inverse problem, as all problems in optics are, or many problems in physics. And it was also solved by a Fredholm integral of the first kind, if I remember well. And so I was introduced to data analysis, essentially signal processing. Yeah. And then I started, after my diploma thesis, I started with a PhD, but I was not so happy.
Yeah.
And then we collaborated at that time with somebody from EMBL, but I had no clue what EMBL was at that time. And then they just started a PhD program for whatever reason. And then I applied for the PhD program. I was invited, and I was among the 6 first people ever to do a PhD at EMBL.
Oh, wow. So this was near the start of EMBL doing PhDs then?
Yes, yeah.
I'm not sure every listener or viewer will know what EMBL is still, which is a truly awesome, inspirational place. So Ernst, you've worked there, so just describe what EMBL is for people.
Well, I can tell you what it was for me and what it was like when I was there. And I was there from 83 until about 2011. So that's when I was employed by EMBL. Yeah. And well, the abbreviation is European Molecular Biology Laboratory, and it was founded in the 1970s, as to somehow counter the efforts in the US and in Britain in molecular biology. Yeah, so it was somehow, the people always regarded it as a let's say the European answer to Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, something like this. Yeah. But it's not, it's just half of the truth, of course. Yeah, but and then the first director, he was actually the head of MRC at that time. So whole of EMBL was very British, let's put it this way, you know. Even the fonts that were used for the official documents were all the same as those used by MRC at that time. Yeah. So, and they started this graduate program, which was not typical at all for Germany. I mean, we didn't have any graduate programs at that time. Yeah. If you did a PhD, you just worked at the lab, and that was completely different. So you were really educated. Basically, we read Allbirds for a whole year and did also a lot of practicals. I have to say, that was really nice. As a PhD student, was brilliant. Yeah, because you were really in a good group. Yeah.
So it is. So I've been to EMBL. I'm fortunate to visit it many times, and it is a very inspirational place, and not so dissimilar maybe to Genelia Farm in some respects, but for the biological applications, real science is driving behind it. And it's very innovative in itself. So I presume that's what really enabled you to act as a springboard for your career. But I'm going to take you back even further now. So why is it you decided to become a physicist? I think I have an answer. Go on.
Well, I know that you would ask this question, yeah, because you reminded me. Because I once told you, I must have drunk a lot of beer that day, because I wanted to build a time machine. Yeah, that was actually the reason. Yeah. I was 12 years old, and I was extremely interested in theoretical physics. Yeah, I have to say that. Yeah. I was always very good at maths. So, yeah, that was somehow the reason. I'm not claiming that I had any clue what physics was actually about when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
But that was certainly the direction that I wanted to go, and I never doubted it. I always wanted to study physics, and I always wanted to become a theoretical physicist. Yeah.
So the next question, which is fairly obvious, is you were fascinated by the maths, physics, but also inventing a time machine is quite specific. So why is it you wanted to invent a time machine?
Because I think I wanted to go back I wanted to be a knight or something like this. Yeah, that's right.
So you sent this picture. So
yeah, I sent you this. That was Age of Empires. Yeah, but I wasn't thinking about the time machine actually. Yeah, but that is one of those games that I used to. This picture is actually from a game that I played with my son. Yeah.
So you're still fascinated.
Actually, I now play it with my grandson. We just played it last week. So we had a Zoom session. I played and he watched me play and told me what to do. Yeah.
Who are you really playing this game for, yourself or your grandson?
I have to say I'm not playing it for myself anymore. I used to, of course, but I mean, I started playing this game probably 30 years ago. And I don't know exactly how old it is, but I'm quite sure it must be about 30 years old now. Yeah. And there's a kind of revival, so there are new versions. And I used to play it with my son. So we really set up little networks here in the house. Yeah. Or we also met with friends and set up networks there. And then there were groups of 5, 6 people playing this game. Yeah. And there were always 2 adults. Yeah. Me and a father of another guy or another boy, a friend of my son. Yeah. And we played that. Yeah.
But you're still fascinated by the realm of the knights and that era?
Yeah, well, I would say it's not as important anymore as it might have been. Yeah.
So does that mean you've given up on inventing a time machine?
I actually gave up. Yeah, I think I have invented a kind of time machine, the only one that really works. Yeah, so the only thing that has worked until now is moving into the future at a rate of about 24 hours per day. Yeah. So, but moving backwards is a bit of a problem.
For the creation of the Earth.
Well, it's up to you to decide, but I think you get it. Yeah. It's the same as becoming an astronaut. Yeah, because if we're all astronauts in a certain sense. Yeah, we're all moving through space. Yeah, moving around the sun. So, well, it's a bit depressing. Yeah, it's not the same as flying to another planet. Sorry.
I like the way you're consoling yourself for never inventing a time machine or becoming an astronaut.
What should I do? So I was always interested in astronomy and trying to be an astronaut. I don't know if I wanted to be an astronaut, but flying to other planets or stars or something like this. But I have absolutely, I admit it, no hope whatsoever. Yeah, it makes no sense to fly to Mars. Yeah, or to have a station on Moon or anything. Yeah, I love the exploration of the solar system. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, so I think, I was always looking forward to a flight to Europe, to Europa. Yeah, or now EU or something like this. But just to see if there's anything below the ice. That's about as far as it goes. And I personally, I think that you can fly there, but you should never come back. The same also with Mars. Yeah, if the people want to fly to Mars, fine, but I just hope they will never ever come back. Yeah.
Why?
Well, if there has been life, who knows? There might be some viruses or some other objects that they can bring back. I don't think that is totally out of the question.
Yeah. No, I would not disagree. It's definitely not totally out of the question. I should get you to have this argument with Eric Betzu because he's actually very keen to go to other planets.
Well, as I said, I also think we should explore other planets, but I don't think that at the moment, I don't really see how humans can actually fly to another planet. I really don't see that. And I think and it's not and it, I mean, if you just look at the radiation levels, yeah, that people would be exposed to on a flight to Mars, or once they're on Mars, or if they're on Moon, or so, the radiation levels are so high, it's the chances are very, very low that people will really survive that. So unless you find some really nice new techniques, and you have to find water, and you might have to find a cave or whatever. A lot of people probably have watched The Martian, so you probably have you, but I have. So that's about.
Yeah, that'll put me off space exploration forever. I like being on this bit of Earth. I'm not that keen to get blasted off somewhere else.
No, there's probably no better place than this one here. Yeah.
No, although I think there's some people who might think I would be quite welcome to be blasted off to another planet.
Well, they probably think about me too. Yeah. So why don't you go off and stay on Moon or something, or hide in a cave?
So coming back to science for a minute, your early career was very much around that development of optics, going super resolution microscopy, and later moved into light sheet as well. Actually, probably starting, if I'm right, back in the very early days of confocal.
Yes.
So that's quite a lot. If you've gone from confocal to 4pi and the super resolution side through to light sheet for real enabling in vivo, what is motivating you to be developing in these directions? You world of physics, you can go all sorts, but you really moved into life science. And I'm sure that isn't because you're a failed physicist, because you never invented a time machine. I'm sure it's because you're passionate. So what is your passion and interest? What's your motivation here?
I think it has always changed, I would say. So first of all, it was tough to master it. Yeah, I mean, you should not forget there are companies out there who've been building optics for 100 years, and there are several of them, and they're doing that quite successful. Yeah, so you have to be at least as good as them. Yeah. Actually, that's something I tell everybody. So a lot of people ask me if they want to build a light sheet microscope. They want to build a light sheet microscope, and I always tell them, why don't you build a regular fluorescence microscope first and compare the pictures you get with that to those that you get from a conventional system. Yeah, okay. And if you're better, okay, then continue. Yeah, because there's nothing you have to build all that anyway, maybe in a different arrangement or so. But the motivation is always different. Yeah, because in the very beginning, I mean, there are a lot of things that you have to do. You have to understand the optics, the lasers. Yeah, you have to understand the electronics, and then we had sensors, photomultipliers. I mean, everything seems so easy nowadays. But you see, you shouldn't forget, we just purchased the photomultiplier, and we built all the electronics ourselves. Yeah, or even the image processing. Yeah, I mean, it was not as if you could purchase an image processing package. Yeah, I mean, when I started, we recorded 4 images per day. Yeah. Yeah, that was the best we could do at that time. That's how I started. Yeah, so maybe in the entire course of my PhD, I probably recorded something like 2,000 to 3,000 pictures. Yeah, but and then later on we recorded, I don't know. I remember we had a day where we recorded 30,000 pictures, and that's somehow what I remember. And then I realized, God, what a huge difference that was. So I think that's one thing that motivates me, or motivated me for many times, and still does to a certain extent. And the other one was also to get these applications to work. Yeah, so trying to look at cells. Yeah, making sure that they survive it, or maybe looking at different dyes and so on and so on. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that happened in these that we did and that we changed, and it's probably not, people are probably not aware of it. Yeah.
But you say, build a microscope better than manufacturers. You've got to be one step ahead of them.
No, I didn't say that. You have to be at least as good. That's what I said. So I don't think there's any better. Yeah.
But there's still a very, so just for area confusion, so I know exactly where you're coming from with this. It isn't because you want to build a microscope that is at least as good as one that exists. It's because actually what you're building is what doesn't exist.
Yes.
It needs what you invent has to be better than what already exists.
Correct. That's exactly the whole point. And it has to fulfill a reasonable purpose, in my opinion. Yeah. So it doesn't make any sense. It's exactly what you say, because if you also look at it, all the things that you showed, it's not as if we purchased an instrument and then slightly modified it. Yeah. But basically every instrument was built from scratch. Yeah. So from a block of metal. Yeah. Yeah. And also the light sheet microscope. I mean, sent you a few pictures. Yeah.
So here's.
Yeah, that was certainly not a modified confocal microscope from Zeiss, yeah, or from Leica or so. That is really completely built from scratch. Yeah. And also these other microscope, this DSLM that we built, yeah, this monolithic device that is really built from a single block of aluminium. Yeah. So, and we really is completely newly designed. Yeah. Not this one that you show, but I sent you also another picture.
There were lots.
Yeah. And this one, that was actually a combined 4-pi theta microscope. Yeah.
I just particularly like this one because it shows just the amount of engineering precision that has to go on in the build.
Yeah.
Of these.
And it's also completely pre-calculated. Yeah, because if you see, there's no. We really, let's say, drilled little holes in which we put pins and threads, and then we just mounted the stuff there. Yeah, so there's hardly any adjustment required. Yeah. Otherwise, it would never work. If you had to adjust it, we would fail completely in these systems. Yeah.
And yet, if I just go to the next one, this looks more like a commercial system.
That's a Zeiss LSFM 780. Yeah, that's from Frankfurt. Yeah, behind that is actually the interesting part, because there's a really nice laser behind that, but you cannot see it. Yeah. No, there's no way. It's really behind the microscope. Yeah.
It's a lovely artistic picture, but a commercial setup. And when you can compare the commercial setup, and actually it's really nicely posed with the shadows and looking very calm and serene. And then we look at a home built, an innovative product. It looks quite scary. And to an end user, as a biologist, you talked about the applications and the importance of applications. This would scare a lot of people off.
That did scare a lot of people. Let's put it this way. Yeah. So that is not a device which you built in order to do some serious applications. I mean, we looked at mouse embryos in this microscope. Yeah. So that's what we tried. I'm not saying that we were really successful. If you look carefully on the left-hand side, you actually see a glass fiber, yeah, which was mounted to this stage, yeah, on the left side, and we attached little objects to that and put that into the sample holder inside. But that's as far as we got with this. Yeah. But you see, the idea there was to see, can we get any further with 4-pi? Does this theta concept work, and all these things? And that's what we managed to do. Yeah. But it was absolutely clear that this had nothing to do with the confocal microscopes. The confocal microscopes that we built at the same time were really addressed. They were really used at EMBL. Yeah. I don't think EMBL purchased any commercial confocal until the mid-90s. Yeah. Until then, all the confocal microscopes were built by our group. And we also wrote the software and whatever had to be done at that time.
Yeah. But the importance of, so a couple, well, actually many of your innovations have been commercialized.
Some of them have been, yes.
In part or in full, in some cases. Yeah. The importance of that. Would you like to comment on the importance of, inventing it, and people can copy what you do in their own labs, but there's a very big importance to commercializing or getting someone like Zeiss, JPK, to take your system and commercialize it. So why is that so important?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure if it's so important. Yeah, I mean, if you work for a company, I would say patenting is very important. And if you have a good collaboration with a company, and for many years we had a very good relationship with Zeiss, and they patented, and then you can be sure that it will actually be used. Yeah. but you cannot always be sure that it will be used. Yeah, so that is the problem. Also, as a private person, even as for a university, patenting something, and then you may have to wait for 10 or 12 years until it becomes a product, that is just too long. I don't think that makes any sense. So you have to be really careful about that. What do you patent, and do you have a plan for how to take advantage of it? So I've been doing that several times, as you mentioned, but and I've probably been lucky because it has been more than once. Yeah, because most people probably have patents, but they've never ever made any money with it. Yeah, so that is definitely not the case. But I think in general, you have to really give it a good thought whether it's worth it. I mean, even in medicine or in biology or so, I mean, you might have found a target, yeah, or you might have identified a nice protein that you would like to work on or you find something that you think it's a drug or so. Let's face it, it will take you 10, 15 years, yeah. And you may have to convince somebody for 2 or 3 years, yeah. And by that time, your patent is 15, 16, 17 years old, and then are you going to make any money of that?
So that's a really good point, and it's one I've spoken to Tony Wilson about in the past. One of the biggest problems with certainly in the world of microscopy, anything that's really innovative, and I think maybe less so today, but certainly historically, is getting it to be adopted by biologists. And I would say, actually, in defense of the commercial companies, it's the only way to get it to have its maximum impact. So it can be sold to lots of universities, lots of research institutes around the world, and for them to be supported. People, users trained on it, engineers to come and fix it, because obviously one lab can't do that. And so actually your innovations have enabled uncountable research projects to be started, probably research projects you never thought would be possible. But for you to succeed, you had to get biology started on the microscope to prove it was needed. How difficult a challenge was that?
That was actually what we spent most time on at EMBL. So that's also something that I'm trying to convince the people that you have to have a kind of culture. Yeah, so you have to have a kind of a certain number of users who are interested in using it and who really put all the faith into this technology and use it for their career. And we were extremely lucky, I have to say. There were a lot of people who used it, really. So I will not drop any names now because I'm quite sure I'll forget a number. But there were several who really, really put their career into it. And then they continued with this after they left EMBL. And then we spent a lot of work actually understanding how to prepare specimens. I mean, you know, nowadays it may seem so obvious, yeah, but at that time, many techniques actually flattened the specimen, so everything collapsed, yeah, because you wanted a nice, good picture in a conventional microscope. Yeah, you were not prepared to do 3D, yeah, and then we had people, and I'll mention at least one name, Robert Bacalao, and Bob Bacalao, and he really. He brought us pictures. I showed him it didn't work. It was completely flat. And then he went back and he looked at his protocols, and then he looked for protocols that produced pictures that were not nice. And in some cases, this was because they survived they didn't collapse. So they were really maintained in 3D. And that was also the reason why we worked a lot with live specimens, because we could be sure that they would not fall apart. So we really had to work with dyes, or look for dyes which you could insert into a live specimen. So of course we had the antibody labeling. Yeah, monoclonal antibodies became very popular during that period. But yeah, that was one thing. Yeah.
And I guess also fluorescent proteins. If you look where you were in your career, mid-90s, coming into the noughties as well, fluorescent proteins were really making big impacts.
Absolutely.
In fact, I don't think microscopy could be as successful without fluorescent proteins.
I totally agree.
I would argue fluorescent proteins would never have been successful, or as successful, without microscopy and its innovations.
The latter, I'm not entirely sure, because I mean, fluorescent proteins are also used in mass spectroscopy and many others techniques. So I'm not quite sure whether you really would need them there. Yeah, not mass spectroscopy, but yeah, but other
The technology
techniques.
certainly.
Yeah.
It's microscopy where they've had their fundamental enabling aspects to it in a way that is.
Yeah, but you see, that's also, I mean, we started with, I had a PhD student, Jamie White, yeah, and he actually introduced GFP to EMBL. So he was in my group, he was a PhD student in my group, and we contacted Roger Chen at that time because, I mean, you couldn't purchase it, and he sent us everything, and we talked to him on the phone several times. And then we used it. We expressed it in bacteria and later on in cells also. Unluckily, not initially in live cells, but we had to fix the cells at that time. But nevertheless, we later on was also in live cells. and I have to say, the biologists were not waiting for him, you know. so it was, we talked about it and said, well, people, oh, well, is there a difference? Is it not the same as autofluorescence and something like this? It was a really weird situation. I also invited Roger Chen to EMBL, and it was a disaster. Yeah, people didn't want to talk to him. Yeah, so in the end, I was the only one who went out with him for dinner after the talk. Yeah, so we moved through Heidelberg during the night, and that was it. And it was much later only that people really appreciated it. It's I don't know. It's funny in hindsight, but at that time it was a bit depressing. Yeah. So.
But I guess that's very so. Obviously, he got his Nobel Prize, Shared Nobel Prize for his work in fluorescent proteins, and just how that's enabled live cell imaging really does enable so much. But it's amazing that he equally struggled then to get people to accept his chemistry. You're having people struggling to accept the microscopy approach because it's not a classic put it on a cover slip and image it flat. It's those difficulties that I guess many of the new scientists coming through today will not have appreciated just how much hard work it must have been to get people to accept that the light sheet as a concept,
yeah,
a big commercial product, to get fluorescent proteins that you're imaging within it are now commonplace.
Exactly. But at that time, as I said, I mean, we're talking about years. Yeah. I mean, also with light sheet microscopy, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're extremely lucky that we had people at EMBL and we had a group that actually tried to express GFP in Drosophila. They were successful. And it was just in the lab next to where our microscope was situated, that room. So we really just had to really go out of the lab, out of the lab into another lab, ask the person to give us this, and then we could put it into the microscope, because otherwise I don't think we would have been successful getting the dyes into the specimens. Yeah, but since the specimen itself expressed the GFP, we had a 3D label. Yeah, and that made a huge. And the pictures were so much better than the ones that they could get, of course, with their confocal microscope. So I'm not telling you it was easy. Yeah, you still had to do a lot of convincing. Yeah, but I really did that. I mean, you see, we built the instrument, and I gave a special talk just to internally. I really tried to collect a few people, and then I told them what we had. And at that time, there were two techniques that we pushed, and one was laser cutters, and the other one was light sheet microscopy. And then I really convinced the people, and it was on a personal basis in order to invest something into this. And one of them was Jochen Wittbrod, with whom we then published the two papers in Science in 2004 and 2008. Yeah, but he had to be convinced. Yeah, and we had to make sure that at a certain time he would also make an investment in the group. Yeah? So he had to invest in a student or a PhD student or in a project or something like this. So it was, yeah, that's it. But it didn't happen by itself. Yeah.
So I guess a good point. You know, being a good scientist is one thing, but you have to do so many other aspects to succeed in it. The tenacity, the salesmanship, the publications demonstrating your science, proving your science to others, and getting others to accept it can be a very difficult task. And as you say, when you look back in time, it seems daft that anyone would ever have questioned it. But you know, as with most innovations, epifluorescence, I think, was questioned at the start. Microscopy was probably questioned way back. We can't go back that far to ask those questions very easily, but well, when you invented your time machine, maybe we can go and ask and see just how difficult.
Yeah, well, at the moment, I just have to remember, and I'm 40 years back, don't forget this. I mean, if I think about it, we started in the 80s and now we have 2020, yeah. We may not have a flying car, yeah, or we don't move through, we still have roads, yeah, which I thought would be gone by the year 2000, yeah, but they still here, yeah. But we have light sheet microscopy, yeah.
And we still got DeLoreans, I think.
Well, but they also move forward in time at a speed of 24 hours per day, yeah.
At 88 miles an hour, wasn't it? Was it 88 miles per hour too?
I think it's even faster actually, because around the sun we're moving at 30 kilometers per second, yeah. So
I'll let your physics work out exactly how far the car, how fast it depends on the direction of the car then. So let's.
That's true. Yeah. So you can always add or subtract these 80 kilometers, yeah.
So
or 80 miles.
Yeah. All the challenges in work. What do you do outside of work to relax?
What I do outside of work to relax, I have to say, at the moment, I think I work too much. Yeah, so I don't relax as much as I should. Yeah. But what I like to do right now, that's the golf. Yeah. So I used to do that for quite a while, and I still do it with my wife. Yeah.
I did not notice, and I've only just noticed. You're wearing a skirt.
Yes.
Well, okay. Strictly speaking, for those who are not actually watching this, a kilt.
It's a kilt,
and
yeah.
Drinking lager, beer.
No, I think it was whiskey. We had a dram. Yeah.
I second guessed you on that one. So,
no. Okay. Well, I just have a cup of tea. I'm sorry if I.
Yeah, no. Actually, don't worry. It's actually. I'm not drinking this time of day. It's actually a cold tea.
Oh, how boring! Yeah.
Sensible though, I think.
That was a fun tournament, and we dressed up as Scots. Yeah.
So you were dressing up as Scotsman.
Yes. Well, I'm not a Scotsman, so I had to dress up as a Scotsman. Yeah, and we purchased those kilts. Yeah.
How traditional were you wearing the kilt?
How traditional?
Yeah.
Well, we're not experts in kilts. Well, it had to look Scottish to the other Germans participating in the tournament. I would say that's as far as we went. Yeah.
So you were properly kitted underneath, and not.
We were definitely kitted underneath. Yeah.
You have to be careful. So what is your handicap? Do you have a handicap?
I have a handicap. Yeah, it's about 13.6 or something like this. Yeah. So it's not so bad. Yeah. But I'm not claiming that I play it every day. So and the rules have changed now for calculating the handicap. So basically every game that you play now has to be counted towards your handicap, yeah, or against your handicap. Yeah. But you're not a golfer.
Yeah.
You're not
I've got a nephew that's a pro golfer and stuff, but no, I've watched them play. They're very good. They're incredibly good, actually. Their skills, just their vision. They can watch someone draw the swing back, and they'll tell you in your ear, just go, "This is where the ball's going." It's incredible their eye for detail. But personally, I can lay claim that I found nearly as many balls as I lost on the game of golf I played.
Wow.
But that was a lot.
I probably lost more balls than I ever found, but well, there's no plus. Definitely not.
So what else do you do outside of work to relax?
At the moment, I cycle a lot. So I have a bicycle now, a new one, an electric bicycle. So I'm using that. I really enjoy that very much because it's very hilly here. So it's like a range extender. That's the way I see it. Yeah.
I was about to say, does that count if your exercise is going out and it's an electric bike?
You still have to cycle. So I think it's a misunderstanding. So you really have to cycle, and trust me, it's very hilly where I live. So if I really want to just drive on a flat course, it's over within a few kilometers. So, and then I really have to cycle uphill. And now I'm cycling up hills that I would have never ever cycled with a regular bike. Yeah. So I've been on truly wild tours by now. Yeah, with this bicycle. Yeah, I'm still amazed. Yeah, Yeah. So also I also took it to Frankfurt and went up in the Taunus up to Saalburg. I mean, those people who may know it, it's really a ride uphill. Yeah. So I did that now several times, and I really enjoyed that also very much. Yeah.
So I actually had a question. Sorry, I don't have a script, but I did have one question for you, because you also sent this picture talking of bicycles.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is a picture of you quite young.
Yes, I'm on the guy on the left side. Yeah.
And with a bike, which looks like 5 of you are sharing one bicycle.
Yeah. Actually, they are the two guys with the same shirt. Yeah. So they are my cousins.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other two are my sisters. Yeah. And they came over for a long holiday. So my mother is British. Yeah. So she's English. She's from Warrington. And we used to go and visit her there. And that was one of those, I think that was the only year that we did not go to England, but rather my grandmother came and she took the cousins along. Yeah. So they stayed with us for a summer or so. Yeah. And as you can see, we all wear these Lederhosen. Yeah.
Yep.
All of them. But that was absolutely normal in that time. It was really.
Tell me you didn't wear that when you visited Warrington.
I actually was one of the worst things that I ever did as a kid, because there was nothing else I had at that time. And I walked with these pants and everybody recognized me as a German, and then I was greeted as a Nazi and everybody said Heil Hitler to me or whatever. So I'm not joking. I think it was the first time in my life that I was really mobbed. Yeah. Or the only time really that I can remember, but it was not nice.
Oh dear. So
Yeah, but
it wasn't. So you actually, it was proper abuse, not just joking abuse. It was proper.
Yeah, I was never. People were not. Nobody beat me up or so. Yeah, but they made fun of it. Yeah, but I really cannot remember that I was depressed or so. I was just probably a bit annoyed. Yeah.
How times have changed.
Yeah.
As time goes through, and tolerance and everything as well. But yeah, Warrington.
I don't have times really changed. Are people really more tolerant now than they were? I doubt it. Yeah.
I like to think so. But my question actually was, do you remember your first bicycle?
No.
No? It was worth a shot. And so just while we want some old pictures, you also sent this picture of yourself and your two sisters and
my grandfather.
Yeah. It was a lovely picture. I couldn't upload all the pictures, but it was a lovely picture.
Yeah, I still have good memories of him. Yeah, he was a chemist. He had a PhD in chemistry. So he was in the First World War, and then he came back, and then he studied chemistry. And he also told me about it, and he actually took care of me. So I have to say, it was a bit tough in a certain sense, because other kids went at home, and I had to go to my grandfather twice a week, and he was not satisfied with the homework. So I had to do much, much more homework. But on the other hand, he really took care of his grandchild, and we did all sorts of things. We talked about chemistry and physics, or I even remember that he brought along some Swedish texts, and we together tried to translate them, which I still think nowadays was nice. And then he was also convinced that I should not only learn how to read Latin, but also how to speak it. So, yeah.
Who would you say was he one of your inspirations, one of the reasons that you got into science to start with? Do you think back and say actually it's probably his influence that took you in this direction?
I wouldn't, at least not consciously, but what I still appreciate is the way that he explained things, that he just didn't just tell me something, but he was more like guiding me towards the answer. Yeah, like asking asking a question here, asking a question there, something like this, and then, just making sure that I somehow came up with the answer myself. Yeah, I think that's what he certainly did. So that was actually good. It was not really what you would expect. Yeah, so a lot of people would always think, well, that's in the old times, people just drilled you to learn and to know everything or so. But I cannot claim that was the case. It was really like guiding you. Yeah. So, telling you how to think in a certain sense. Yeah.
So who would you say have been your inspirations in your career? Inside or outside of work, who's been your inspirations?
I can tell you the inspirations. Well, I'm not so sure, because there are certainly people that impressed me. I have to say, Tom Jovin always impressed me. I met him when I was very young, because he was a friend of my boss in Frankfurt at the Max Planck Institute. Because my boss at that time, Ernst H.K, he actually also came from Göttingen, so he to Frankfurt, and he knew Tom Jovin quite well, and I was always impressed because I always think this guy always did something, and I was of course very young, and I thought he was extremely old, and I was impressed that he was so old and he still did new things, well, and. That somehow impressed me. I have to say that. So, but apart from that, there are probably other people also. But it's not that I have pictures of them here on my walls or so, and then I permanently think about them.
Okay, I'd be slightly unnerved if that was the case.
Yeah.
But I do notice you've got a couple of, I guess they're not Muppets, but they look like Muppets in the background.
Yeah, they're for my grandchildren. Yeah.
So how much time do you spend with your grandchildren? Like your grandfather's stuff, do you get much time?
Yeah, not as much. Not as much. No. At the moment, it's a bit unlucky. The last time we saw them was over just the week after Christmas, and then we talk regularly on FaceTime or on Zoom or so. And then I told you last week, for the very first time, we also played Age of Empires in a Zoom session. Yeah, but that's. I also we do some other things, but we spend much less time than we should, or that we would like to. Let's put it this way. So last year was a problem, but the year before we spent much more time with the kids.
Yeah. So I remember a few years ago talking to you, and that was one of your I guess one of your most important interests outside of work was your grandchildren.
Yes, I still think that's the case. Yeah, so we unluckily we cannot communicate with them so often, but I have to say it's a constant topic. Yeah. So how good is he? How well is he doing in school? And then my daughter tells us about the football or whatever. Yeah. So whatever.
So do you follow any any team sports or any other sports then?
Well, I probably follow football every Saturday. Yeah. Or during the week. So there are two teams that I follow a little bit. Yeah.
Which are?
TSG Hoffenheim, which is just down the road.
Yep.
5 kilometers from here, or less than 5 kilometers. And then the other one is Frankfurt. Yeah. But I think that is more my wife's team. But she's not here in the room, so she doesn't hear it. Yeah.
So you didn't have to say that then. So that's fine.
Yeah. No.
Going back to the career, you worked very closely with Stefan Hell for some time. So. What was that like? What was the relationship like? How did that come about? What's the history of that?
Well, he actually did his PhD in Frankfurt. In Heidelberg at the university there, and then he also worked with in the company of Roel Wijnands van Reesand, if I remember well. And Roel Wijnands van Reesand, he had been the boss, my first boss at EMBL. But then he left, and I became the group leader. And then he told me that there's this guy Stefan, and he's very good, and if I wasn't interested in having him as a postdoc in my lab. And then Stefan came along, and then we talked about some projects, and one of them was for pi microscopy, and that was of interest because that had been a project that we'd been working on before. Yeah, so it was not as that he brought it, but we had already started. We also had a device, but we realized at that time it was much too complicated to get the interference going. So I always thought that could be an interesting project, and we also knew that in principle you could improve the resolution. And then we started with that. So and then at the same time, in a totally different project, we also had purchased a 2-photon laser. Yeah, so because I mean. Even when you look at what you saw this timeline, yep. But actually the major stuff was always building confocal fluorescence microscopes. Yeah. And so they were working at that time, and we also added one of those lasers to a confocal fluorescence microscope. And then he was in my group for almost 3 years. So it's not as if he just popped in and popped out, but we published about 10 papers together, and he was in the group for I think 3 years. Yeah, almost, not exactly, but almost 3 years. Yeah.
So you can lay claim that Stefan Hall is one of your protege that's now outside in the microscopy world.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that he would say that. Yeah, but yeah, because the relationship deteriorated. Yeah, because he's very, very ambitious, and he's always afraid, or at least at that time he was, that somebody else would claim the honor for certain projects. But so that was a bit weird, I would say. Yeah. So yeah.
And things now?
Well, we talk to each other, but what do we talk about? Kids. Yeah.
Not football, then.
I'm not sure. No, last time we met, I think the last time we met must have been in San Francisco. Yeah. I think that was the last time we met, but since then I have not seen him. Yeah. Well, I see him every now and then, of course, but that's not so often. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, in the world, unless it's conferences, there isn't much opportunity to meet many people, really. So it's always within those conferences that we get there. So would you class yourself as a physicist or a biologist?
I think I'm still a physicist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm somehow afraid, because there are certain topics that interest me a lot. And at the moment, it's definitely getting a better understanding for signal to noise and certain aspects. I mean, I have to say, we're doing a lot of biology, of course, and I think we're really deep in biology at the moment, very, very deep in several topics. And I have to be interested in that, otherwise we would not be able to do that. Yeah. So, but I always try to also see it from a physicist's point of view. So from so from a mathematical point of view, let's put it this way. Yeah.
So throughout your career, what period have you found the most difficult or challenging time throughout your career?
Difficult or challenging? I don't know really, because I think it's always the presence, the present times. These are always the most difficult ones. Yeah. I also think that right now. Yeah. So, but at the moment, I'm more concerned with, am I doing the right stuff? Let's put it this way. Yeah, so that's a real concern of mine. Yeah. So I do a lot, and I work on a lot of things, and I'm not wasting my time. Probably I'm not playing any games, or also I'm not watching movies also to a large extent. So even if I go on YouTube, I probably watch, I don't know, the latest video by Wolfram on Mathematica issues, or something like that. Yeah.
I'm offended you're not watching the Microscopists.
Maybe I'll change. I watch one tomorrow. It's not a promise. No, but I always think the present time is always the most complicated.
Which I think is good to hear, actually, because you've got every reason to be super confident in your work. You can look back with great honor and pride with what you achieved today, and yet still you're worried that you might be taking a misstep or something that isn't going to be mainstream or as impactful as what you've done before. And I think it's incredible that you still have that fear, that worry.
It's not a fear. It's also, let's say, there's also part of it is also disappointment. Yeah, because you don't get any credit for being right in the past. Yeah, because I mean, there's something like, I always think there are various stages, and amongst them is that people don't care, or they tell you it's not important, or it's complete bullshit or rubbish or whatever, and then people accept it, and there are probably various other stages, and in the end, it's their idea, Yeah. So, and if you achieve that, then you know, well, okay, then it must have not been so stupid. And I have experienced this more than once. Yeah. So I'm really surprised by this. And there's this saying that success or failure is an orphan. Yeah. But success has many fathers. Yeah. Yeah. So and that's a German saying. I'm not quite sure whether you can translate this as.
Oh, that translates perfectly.
Perfectly, but you get the idea. Yeah. So in the very beginning, it's just, well, it just changes, and that has happened various times. Yeah. And there are also some grants which I applied for, which I still think were absolutely brilliant, but they were not funded. Yeah. And then we did it. Yeah. And which proves us right, or me right, or whatever. Yeah. But that doesn't help me. Yeah, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Yeah? Go take the grant and slap it into somebody's face and tell them, see, it has worked nevertheless, although you did not fund me. And this has happened several times. And I always think it's also a serious problem. If you really want to be ahead of your times, then you just have to accept this. Yeah. The fact that people don't understand you, or that they don't believe you, yeah, or that they don't regard something as important. Yeah, don't forget. I mean, you mentioned this before. I started with confocal fluorescence microscopy, but at that time it filled the whole room. Yeah, the laser was huge. Yeah, and then going to a lab and telling the people, I think in a few years a confocal microscope will be in every lab. Yeah, because I know that for a fact. People said, this guy is absolutely crazy. Yeah, we're never going to fit this into this room. But that was not the way that we saw it. Not only me, but many other people too. Yeah, they realized it was just a device. And the same also with light sheet microscopy. Yeah, don't forget. I mean, I've been through this several times. Yeah, light sheet microscopy is the same. Yeah, you permanently had to convince the people. Even nowadays they tell you, but the problem is the sample preparation. No, the problem is not the sample preparation. That's an opportunity. Yeah, you can do it differently. Yeah, you don't have to do it on cover slips, for Christ's sake. Yeah, do it in a natural manner. Yeah, keep it in 3D. Maintain it. Yeah, keep it viable. Yeah, that's the way you should see it. But that's not the way that people see it. Yeah, they see it as, well, but all my peers use this, and they work on that. Yeah. And if I now follow your line, well, but then I have to convince my peers, and then of course I have to make all sorts of controls, and in the end I have the same work. And am I going to be able to publish it? Yeah. Okay. So that's it. Yeah. And then you have to overcome this. Yeah.
I was going to say,
so these discussions more than once. Yeah.
So when you walked in and you were suggesting these things, I would argue you were seen as the clown of the field at the time. Beautiful picture of you. Must have been 1-2 years old, maybe.
I probably 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could walk and stand. Yeah.
Wonderful picture. But yeah, I guess it was a bit like that. You'd have felt like the clown saying these absurd things, and people weren't listening, and yet you were proven right.
I'm not,
at the end.
Don't. I'm not telling you that everything was right, but I think in general I was quite right. Yeah.
But the other thing is quite interesting. There was two things. One is the failure of getting a grant and just accepting that some grants that you know or you feel fundamentally are good and are right that aren't successful for whatever reason. In some cases, just because there's other ideas and that panel thought it was better at the time, and it doesn't get pushed. So you keep going at it and you will get the funding. If it's going to be right, you'll get there. But you also mentioned how the academics were risk averse. But of course, they're scared that if they try to adopt a new technology with new labeling processes, it's going to take time. And that time means they're going to publish not as quickly, and it might not work. It's a gamble. And if it doesn't work, they've lost a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years of not being able to publish, which means getting their next grant is more difficult. And I think that's an academic, it's hard to describe. It's high risk stakes. Your career can go very rapidly if you're not always succeeding. And maybe that's a problem with the way the academic community works.
That's what I think. We're missing a lot of opportunities because a lot of people don't take any risks. Yeah.
But those that do take the risk, if it succeeds,
you don't know about all those people who failed. Yeah, they take a risk and they fail. I mean, whom do we know? Yeah, I mean, you go to an American lab and you see 10 postdocs. So how many of them are you going to see 5 years later? Yeah, maybe one. And the other 9, what do they do? Do they drive a taxi or whatever? I often wonder where they are, you know.
I think for those listening, it is a difficult world, but it's a world you can succeed in. I think you do have to have a lot of tenacity. You have to keep going at it and determination, and you have to respin things. I'm sure with the grants that were not successful, but you eventually succeeded, you must have sold it in a slightly different way next time to get that funding.
Yeah, well, I'm probably the last person who can seriously complain about grants. So, I mean, also here in Frankfurt. Yeah. So I mean, we got so much money. Yeah, and I really think we used it, we spent it very well. Yeah, and but there was a kind of basic funding. Yeah, so I did not have to go to somebody's lab and tell them that I had invented this fantastic microscope and we can now look at bugs in a completely different way. So I didn't have to convince a biologist or a physicist or an engineer. Yeah, I just did what I thought was right. Yeah, yeah, and so that of course helps. Yeah, and I'm actually convinced that it is absolutely essential. That's what I'm afraid of. You know, that in the end, that's the only way you can really do science. Yeah. Yeah, if you permanently have to work and wait. I mean, Janelia Farm is more or less following this. Yeah, yeah. No grants. If you have a good idea, you go to your boss and he says, "Well, I will give you so much money." And it was Emble like. Emble was like, you know, I said, "Well, I have this nice idea, but I need somebody," and I found somebody. Yeah, I went to Leonard Philipson, who was a PhD director at that time, and he would say, "Well, okay, I think that's a good idea." And by the time you went back to your lab, he had already told the HR department to employ this person. Yeah. Yeah. Or even I remember when we purchased the first laser, which at that time was also around 2-photon laser was around 150,000 euro D-mark at that time. Yeah. I mean, you just went there, talked to him. You didn't write any text. Yeah. You told him what was possible. And he said, "Okay, do it." And then, yeah. And then you move ahead quickly. Yeah. And the others, they apply for the laser and then it takes them 2 years. And then and by that time we had already published. Yeah.
And maybe we'll see the times change and more of those type of facilities, institutes come forward.
I have no hope. I'd be very surprised. And unless you find a private person who funds your research, then maybe you can do that, but not with public money. Yeah. They're all, and the administration is increasing and increasing and increasing. It's worse and worse and worse. Yeah, I mean, in the past, you just did your work, you went home or you stayed in the lab for the night, and now you have to keep a timesheet. Yeah, and the timesheet is maybe only valid from 8 o'clock in the morning until, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the evening. Yeah, because if you stay there longer, then you are not following all the rules, whatever.
So let's be honest. Do you really stick to those hours?
To which hours?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that you have a timesheet which does not allow you maybe to enter a different time or so. Maybe I'm exaggerating this, but you get the idea. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So people expect you to work office hours, and
It's not just the office hours. It's the ability to be innovative and risky within and not jeopardize your career because it's only 3 years worth of funding. You know, EMBL, Janelia, you have longer term positions there, which gives you chance to be more risky over that time, because something will succeed if you're good. Something will succeed over that time frame, and I think that's a model that's really good, and one that hopefully will be mirrored in more places. So as you say, we need people who've got the funds to invest, because it's often not from government funds. It's got to come from private sources.
Yes.
And there is real opportunity for people to make an impact there. Just like Janelia as one very good example. So we have actually been speaking, I think, for an hour. So I have to ask some quick questions. I always do. What do you drink, coffee or tea?
Tea. Actually, I do both, but in the mornings it's always tea.
Yeah, well, yeah, cold tea. I'm not sure I like it.
No, I don't drink iced tea or something like this. No.
Yeah. Beer or wine?
Actually, both. Yeah, depends, I would say, on the season. Yeah.
Red or white wine?
Probably also both.
Yeah. Whiskey or gin? This is an obvious answer.
Actually, also both. No,
Your virtual
I always
background-
have a bottle of gin here. Yeah.
I think your virtual background is probably just hiding a whole drinks cabinet of all sorts of things.
We always have about 7 different whiskies. Yeah.
So, and I think you mentioned you do not watch much TV. So, would you rather read a book or watch TV to chill out?
Again, I would probably do both. Yeah. So it
So
depends.
So on TV, what sort of TV do you watch?
I probably watch science fiction movies a lot. Yeah. So the last ones that I watched was Tenet, which I found
Haven't
which
seen it
really
yet.
impressed me.
Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, but I thought it was really, 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 really clever. I was really impressed. And then the other one that I just watched at the moment is on Amazon. It's The Expanse.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's more because I'm desperate. There's nothing better. That's about as far as it goes.
Fair enough. And because I am looking at the clock here, I'm sorry. I've got to ask, what is your best science joke?
My best science joke. I have to say the only one that I remember is the one that Ernst Ludwig Florin once told me. And I think he brought it from Munich at that time, and that was something like, what does when a biophysicist talks to a physicist, he talks about biology, and when he talks to a biologist, he talks about physics. And what do two biophysicists talk about? Women. Yeah. So well, you asked for it. So.
You're right, it wasn't politically correct. But yes, we get the stereotypical joke.
You get the stereotypical joke, because we never knew any female biophysicists at that time. Let's face it. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank goodness times have changed on that front.
That's the politically correct statement. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But it is, and you just got to go back. Petra Schwiller is truly inspirational. And actually, Petra was on that teaching on the same course as yourself back at EMBL back in 2002, I think.
And you still remember the year, so I wouldn't have known that. Yeah.
You know, I've just gone wrong. It's 2001. It's when my son was born.
Because I've been doing these courses. I think the first course we ever did was in 1988. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, of course it was truly inspirational.
Yeah.
It gave me so much, and it showed me where my career should go.
I'm pleased to hear that. Really. Yeah.
It was brilliant. Anyway, on that note, Ernst, thank you very much for being so honest and open. It's been great to catch up with you. This whole podcast series was actually thanks to a chat with yourself over coffee at Elmi in Dublin, and also with Scott Fraser, and just listening to inventing time machines and things like that. I think it's just great for people to hear about the scientists behind the science, if that makes sense. And you've been brilliantly entertaining. So thank you very much.
Okay. I'll probably not watch it for another year or so because I don't enjoy watching myself on these movies, I have to say. Or in these interviews. Sorry.
I wouldn't call it a movie.
Not a movie, yeah, but you know what? On a I don't know, what is it? It's a movie in a certain sense, or it used to be a movie, maybe. Yeah. Something's moving, at least. Yeah.
Okay. Ernst, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. To view all audio and video recordings from this series, please visit bitesizebio.com/the-microscopists.